Imagine this. You've done everything right. You built the life they told you would make you happy, career, friends, maybe even love. And yet at 2 a.m., you're lying awake, staring at the ceiling, suffocating in your own mind. You scroll, you distract, you numb. But nothing fills that silent, aching space inside. You laugh with others and cry alone. You function, but you're not alive. Deep down, you know something's missing, not from the world, but from within. And maybe what hurts the most is the thought that no one's coming to save you. That no matter how many people surround you, you still feel profoundly alone. Not because you are unloved, but because you are unseen, even by yourself. This isn't about being broken. It's about being disconnected from the one person you need most, you. And until you turn inward, no amount of love, success, or distraction will ever be enough. But here's the truth. Buried beneath all the noise, beyond the fear and the guilt and the endless search for meaning, is a quiet voice that's been waiting, your voice. The part of you that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for attention. It waits, patiently. And every time you ignore it, every time you reach outward instead of inward, it dims just a little more. Not because it's weak, but because it's tired of fighting for space in a mind that's always somewhere else. This is where healing begins. Not in fixing yourself, not in becoming someone new, but in coming home to the self you've abandoned. Not with shame, not with blame, but with compassion. Because maybe the thing you've been running from all this time isn't pain. Maybe it's presence. And the terrifying, beautiful truth that everything you've been searching for has always been inside you. So let's be honest, most of us spend our lives waiting for someone to understand, to apologize, to make it right. Waiting for a partner to love us the way we need. Waiting for a friend to check in. Waiting for time to heal what we refuse to face. We tell ourselves, one day someone will see me, someone will fix this. But what if no one comes? What if the person you've been waiting for has been here all along, breathing your breath, walking your steps, breaking beneath your own silence? That's the part no one teaches you. That's the hidden cost of survival in this world. You forget how to turn inward. You become a master of pretending you're okay while screaming behind your eyes, and the world doesn't notice because it's too busy doing the same. But here's the medicine. Raw and untamed, no one is coming to save you, and that is your freedom. Because the moment you stop waiting is the moment you take your power back. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop handing your healing to people who can barely hold their own. You begin for the first time to walk toward yourself, not because you're broken, but because you're the only one who can finally come home. And maybe that's the most radical act of all, choosing to stop running, not from the pain, but toward it. Because pain, when faced with honesty and presence, doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. Beneath the heartbreak, the disappointment, the silence, there is something untouched. A core of resilience that has survived every storm, even the ones you never told anyone about. But you've spent so long avoiding it, fearing it, numbing it. You've been taught that strength means pushing through, pretending, staying busy. But what if real strength is softer? What if it looks like sitting quietly with your own sorrow, like holding space for your own story without judgment, like finally telling yourself, it's okay to feel this. This is where the healing truly begins. Not with advice, not with distractions, but with your willingness to meet yourself in the dark and not flinch. Because the darkness isn't the enemy. The refusal to look into it is. Then let's look deeper, because this is where everything begins to shift. Not when life gets easier, but when your perception does. Buddhism teaches something most people aren't ready to hear. Suffering is optional. Pain is inevitable, yes, but suffering, that's a decision. It's what happens when we grip too tightly to what's already gone, when we replay conversations like broken records, when we carry moments that have long since ended. You think the pain is in the past, but it's not. It's in your refusal to let the past be past. Imagine this. Someone throws a burning coal at you. It hurts. But now imagine catching it, holding it, refusing to let it drop. That's what we do with anger, with betrayal, with shame. We carry it as if holding on will make it meaningful, as if it will give us justice, but it doesn't. It just burns. And the longer we grip it, the deeper the scar. The Buddha said, pain is what the world does to you. Suffering is what you do to yourself. That sounds harsh, but it's liberating, because if suffering is a choice, then so is freedom. You can stop right now. You can choose not to carry what isn't yours anymore. You can choose to let go, not for them, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. Letting go doesn't mean you forget. It means you finally stop bleeding from a wound that's already healed. So let's begin again, but this time right here. Not in yesterday's regrets, not in tomorrow's what-ifs, but in this breath, right now. Most people live as time travelers, mentally stuck in a past they can't change or worrying about a future that hasn't arrived. The mind spins, replaying old conversations, rewriting decisions, rehearsing pain, but healing doesn't exist in memory. It doesn't live in fantasy. It only exists in the now. Take a breath, really. Stop and take one. Feel your lungs expand. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice your body. That's presence. That's the doorway. Because until you anchor into the present, you'll keep feeding the fire of your suffering without even realizing it. You'll keep living in wounds that no longer bleed just because you've never learned to stop reopening them. The now doesn't offer answers. It offers space to feel without reacting, to breathe without running, to witness without judgment. This is the foundation of all healing, not escape, but attention, not solving, but seeing. Because when you are truly present, you begin to remember something ancient and quiet. There is no problem in this exact moment. The pain lives in the story, the peace lives in your breath, and you have access to it. Always. Not when you figure it all out, but now. Then let's talk about the part that hurts the most. The part we rarely admit. You're still holding on. Not because it helps, not because it heals, but because some part of you believes that letting go means losing a person, a memory, a version of yourself. Letting go feels like betrayal, like saying it didn't matter. But here's the paradox. The longer you cling, the more it hurts. Not because of what happened, but because you refuse to stop reliving it. You carry it everywhere. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the moment someone left, the thing they said. You tell yourself you've moved on, but the ache is still there, buried under distractions and denial. And why? Because somewhere inside, you've confused holding on with love, with justice, with identity. But attachment isn't love. Clinging isn't strength. It's fear. Fear that without the pain, you won't know who you are. The Buddha once asked, if someone hands you a burning coal and you choose to hold it, whose hand is burned? The answer is obvious. And yet, we do it every day, not just with people, but with guilt, with regret, with who we think we should have been. Letting go isn't forgetting. It's not pretending it didn't matter. It's saying, I choose peace over pain. I choose presence over punishment. Because the tighter you hold, the deeper the burn. And the moment you loosen your grip just a little, you'll feel something you may not have felt in years. But freedom doesn't always feel like relief. Not at first. Sometimes it feels like emptiness, like standing in a room you used to fill with someone else's presence, someone else's story, and realizing it's quiet now. That quiet can be terrifying because pain gave you something to hold. It gave you meaning, identity, a role to play. Without it, who are you? This is the hidden cost of healing. You have to face what's beneath the noise, the ache, the loneliness, the uncertainty. And most people would rather carry pain than face that silence. They'd rather cling to the wound than risk the unknown of who they might become without it. But silence isn't absence. It's space. It's the space where something new can grow. The moment you stop clutching the rope, your hands begin to heal. The moment you drop the stone, your body feels light again. And maybe, just maybe, in that lightness, you begin to feel your true self rise, untethered, whole, half, and finally at peace. Because letting go is not losing. It's choosing yourself over a story that no longer serves you. It's the beginning of something the pain could never offer: peace, clarity, and the power to begin again. So how do you begin? How do you let go of something that's lived inside you for so long it feels like part of who you are? You begin gently, slowly, not with force, but with awareness. Start by asking yourself, what am I still carrying? Whose voice still echoes in my mind? What moment from the past do I keep replaying like it might somehow end differently this time? These are your anchors, the emotional weight tied to stories you never released. And until you name them, you can't free yourself from them. Letting go isn't a one-time decision. It's a practice. Some days you'll feel light, other days the weight will return. That's okay. Healing isn't linear. It loops, it tests, it deepens. But every time you choose release over resistance, you grow a little more. Every time you say, "This no longer defines me," you reclaim a piece of your power. Remember, the pain itself didn't make you suffer. Your attachment to the pain did. Letting go doesn't mean erasing the past. It means refusing to let the past define your present. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the quiet strength to say, I don't have to carry this anymore. And that choice, that quiet, radical choice, is where true healing begins. Let me tell you a story. 2 monks were walking in silence when they came across a woman standing beside a river, unable to cross. Without hesitation, one monk lifted her onto his back, carried her through the water, and set her down on the other side. They continued their journey. Hours later, the second monk finally spoke. "You shouldn't have touched her. It goes against our teachings." The first monk smiled gently and replied, "I set her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" That's what we do. We carry things long after they're gone. Conversations that ended years ago. People who left. Mistakes we can't undo. Words never spoken. We replay them, hold them, define ourselves by them. But what if you set them down? What if you stopped carrying ghosts? Because clinging doesn't protect you. It imprisons you. It keeps you bound to what no longer exists, reliving pain that has no place in the present. And yet, we fear letting go. We fear it means losing something important. But the truth is, we're often holding on to pain out of habit, not meaning. Imagine standing beside a river, your hands full of stones, each one a memory, a betrayal, a regret. Now imagine releasing them one by one, the sound they make as they sink into the water, the way your arms feel as the weight disappears. That's not forgetting. That's freedom. Letting go is not erasing. It's allowing. It's saying, this happened, I honor it, but I no longer live inside it. And maybe that's the turning point, not in fixing the past, but in no longer living there. Because here's what no one tells you. The past has no power unless you keep returning to it. Every time you replay the hurt, every time you let an old voice narrate your worth, you're handing over the present moment, the only place healing can happen. So pause. Ask yourself, what am I still clinging to? Is it a person, a version of yourself that no longer fits? A future that never arrived? The belief that you can't be okay unless something changes outside of you? This is the cost of attachment. It teaches you to measure your peace by things you cannot control. And the more you cling, the more fragile your joy becomes. That's why change feels like grief. That's why love feels like fear. That's why freedom feels unsafe. Because we've built our safety around illusion, around control, permanence, predictability. But life doesn't work that way. People leave, feelings shift, circumstances crumble, and if your peace is built on anything outside of you, it will fall with them. Letting go isn't giving up. It's reclaiming your right to live untethered. It's standing in your own presence and saying, even if everything else changes, I will not abandon myself. That is where your power begins. That is where suffering ends. And this is where we meet the deepest fear. What if I let go and there's nothing left? What if the pain was all I had to hold on to? What if without it, I feel empty? But the truth is, you're not empty. You've just forgotten what it feels like to be unburdened. You've carried the weight for so long, the absence of it feels unfamiliar, like silence after years of noise. But silence isn't emptiness. It's clarity. It's the space where your true self finally has room to breathe. Look at nature. The tree doesn't cling to its leaves in winter. It lets them fall. Not because they didn't matter, but because it knows they serve their purpose. Only by shedding the old can new growth begin. And you too are allowed to release what no longer serves you. Not because it wasn't real, not because it didn't shape you, but because it's time. Letting go is not a betrayal of the past. It's an act of loyalty to your future. It's how you make room for peace, for joy, for self-trust. You cannot receive what's next if your hands are still full of what has already passed. So let yourself loosen the grip. Not all at once, just enough. Enough to remember that you're still here, still whole, still capable of living a life that isn't defined by what you've survived, but by how you choose to rise. And perhaps the most powerful way to rise is through presence, not in thought, not in memory, but in this exact moment. So let's return again gently to the breath. Feel the inhale, the exhale, that quiet rhythm that asks for nothing but your attention. This is the river beneath everything. Your breath, your awareness, your being. No story, no past, just now. And in this now, ask yourself one question. What would it feel like to be free? Not free from pain, but free from the need to carry it. Not free from memory, but free from being owned by it. Close your eyes. Imagine you are standing beside that same river. In your hands, you still hold the stones, grief, guilt, fear, unmet expectations. And one by one, you begin to drop them. Not with force, but with grace. They fall. The water receives them without judgment, and something strange happens. You don't feel smaller. You feel lighter. Because letting go doesn't take anything from you. It gives you back to yourself. It returns you to the place inside you that was never broken, never lost, just buried beneath the noise of holding on too long. And in that quiet, you remember, this is not the end. This is the beginning of freedom, of peace, of a life lived not in reaction to pain, but in alignment with your deepest truth. Now sit with that feeling just for a moment. The lightness, the stillness, the space where the past no longer grips you and the future no longer frightens you. This is the moment where healing begins to take root, not as a grand event, but as a quiet shift. The decision to stop fighting, to stop clinging, and to start allowing. Because here's the truth. Healing is not about fixing what's broken. It's about realizing that maybe you were never broken to begin with. That the parts of you that hurt were simply the parts asking to be seen, to be held, to be released. And when you finally create the space to listen, to feel without judgment, to breathe without resistance, that's when the transformation begins. This is not a path of perfection. You will still feel pain. Old wounds may resurface, but the difference is you no longer identify with them. You no longer build your home inside them. You watch them rise, you let them pass, like clouds in the sky, like leaves on the river. The more you practice this presence, this gentle witnessing, the more peace becomes your natural state. Not because life is perfect, but because you've stopped trying to make it so. You've stopped resisting change. You've stopped needing to hold on. And that, more than anything, is what it means to be free. So let's take it deeper, because freedom isn't just about letting go. It's about what happens next. It's about who you become when the pain no longer runs the show. When you're no longer defined by the person who was hurt, abandoned, rejected, but by the one who chose to rise anyway. And that choice, it happens moment by moment. You wake up one day, and instead of reaching for your phone to escape your thoughts, you sit with them. You notice the ache, but you don't run. You notice the emptiness, but you don't try to fill it. You let it be there. And somehow, in that simple act of allowing, something shifts. The ache softens. The emptiness begins to feel like openness, like space, like possibility. This is what mindfulness teaches us. You don't have to fix the moment. You just have to be in it. You don't have to solve your pain. You just have to stop abandoning yourself every time it arises. Because most suffering doesn't come from what's happening right now. It comes from what we're telling ourselves about it. It comes from the story. This means I'm not enough. This means I'm unlovable. This means it will always be like this. But when you strip away the story, what's left is just sensation, just breath, just presence. And presence is power. It doesn't erase the past, but it frees you from its grip. It doesn't guarantee joy, but it opens the door to peace. Not because life gets easier, but because you finally stop resisting what is. And in that surrender, you return to something sacred, yourself. And once you return to yourself, something beautiful happens. You stop chasing. You stop chasing love, approval, closure. You stop begging the world to validate your worth because you begin to feel it. Not as an idea, but as a quiet knowing deep in your bones, I am enough. But that's where the real challenge begins, because the world will still test you. People will still misunderstand you. Some will walk away. Others will project their pain onto you. And your old patterns will whisper, maybe if I just try harder, maybe if I change, they'll stay. But now you know better. You know that bending to fit into places that shrink you isn't peace. It's self-abandonment. And you've done that long enough. So instead, you pause, you breathe, you let them go, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because now you understand your peace is too sacred to bargain with. You no longer tie your worth to how someone else sees you. You no longer collapse just because someone couldn't meet you where you are. This is detachment, not coldness, but maturity. Not withdrawal, but wisdom. It's the art of loving without losing yourself, of caring deeply without clinging, of showing up fully but knowing when to step away. And when you live from this place, anchored, whole, aware, no one can take that from you. You're no longer at the mercy of the world because you've finally come home to the one place you were always meant to belong, yourself. Then let's begin here with the story. The one you've been telling yourself for years, I'm not enough. I always ruin things. I'll never be whole again. This story didn't begin with you. It was shaped by moments, by pain, by absence, by the way someone looked at you like you didn't matter. Over time, those moments became a script, and that script became your identity. But here's the truth you've been waiting to hear. You are not broken. You're not a problem that needs to be fixed. You're a human who learned how to survive in a world that didn't always know how to love you. The way you've coped through perfectionism, through people-pleasing, through silence, is not weakness. It's intelligence. It's evidence that somewhere inside you chose to keep going. But survival isn't the same as living. And at some point, the old story becomes too small for who you're becoming. You feel it. That subtle ache that says, this isn't me anymore. This is the invitation to pause, to question, to ask yourself, who would I be without this story? Without the guilt, without the constant inner war. And maybe the answer isn't someone new, but someone you forgot, someone softer, someone freer, someone who was never broken, only buried, and now ready to come back to life. So let's stop for a moment, not to run, not to fix, but to see, to look at yourself not through the eyes of judgment, but through the eyes of compassion. What if every mistake you've made was never a failure, but a lesson in disguise? What if the parts of you you've spent years hiding, the fears, the flaws, the fractures, were never reasons for shame, but doorways into your depth? You've been taught to wear masks, to be strong, to get over it. But what if true strength is taking the mask off? What if healing isn't about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else? Every scar you carry is proof that you've lived, that you've felt, that you've tried. They are not blemishes, they are your map. And the moment you stop hiding them, you start rewriting your story. Not the one where you were always the one who was left, the one who was broken, the one who wasn't enough, but the one who kept walking, kept breathing, kept loving anyway. That's not weakness. That's courage. And maybe the most powerful truth of all is this: you don't need to earn your wholeness. You've always had it. You just need to return to it. And returning doesn't require a grand transformation. It starts with something quiet, something gentle, like choosing to speak to yourself with kindness instead of criticism, like noticing the tension in your chest and breathing into it instead of pushing it away, like pausing in the middle of a storm, not to escape, but to remind yourself you are still here, still capable of choosing presence over panic, still worthy, even when the old story tries to pull you back in. Because healing isn't loud. It doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it looks like sitting in silence with your pain and whispering, "I see you, but you don't own me anymore." It looks like waking up on a hard day and choosing to rise anyway. It looks like taking one small step away from who you were taught to be and one step closer to who you truly are. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be real, to be whole, to be free. And that begins when you finally stop asking what's wrong with you and start asking, what's right with me that I've forgotten? Because that's the real shift. Not fixing yourself, but remembering yourself. Remembering that beneath the armor, the noise, the survival mode, there is still something soft, still something sacred, still something untouched by everything you've been through. You are not just the product of your pain. You are the awareness behind it, the witness, the one who made it through. And maybe you've spent years measuring your worth by how little you hurt, how much you achieve, how well you hide your scars. But what if worth isn't something you earn? What if it's something you already are? The truth is, healing doesn't require you to become anyone else. It only asks you to stop abandoning who you've always been, to sit with your truth even when it's messy, to show up for yourself, especially when it's hard. Because in the end, healing isn't about returning to the person you were before the pain. It's about becoming the person who could hold that pain and still choose to live, still choose to love, still choose to begin again. And beginning again doesn't mean starting over. It means starting differently. It means walking the same path, but with new eyes, with less judgment, with more softness. It means no longer measuring your healing by how quickly the pain disappears, but by how gently you hold yourself when it returns. Because yes, it will return. Some days, the past will come knocking. Old thoughts, old fears, old wounds. But now, you'll meet them with presence, not panic. With compassion, not resistance. You'll no longer say, "Why am I still feeling this?" You'll say, "Of course, you're here. I've carried you for so long, but I don't have to carry you forever." This is what rewriting your story looks like. Not in one grand act of reinvention, but in the quiet moments where you choose yourself, where you catch the old narrative creeping in and gently rewrite it with truth. Not the truth someone gave you, but the one you found within. The one that says, "I am not broken. I am not behind. I am not too late. I am exactly where I need to be, and that is enough." And from that place, from enoughness, you begin to live differently. You stop chasing healing like it's a finish line and start honoring it as a relationship with yourself, one built not on conditions, but on presence. You start showing up for yourself the way you always wanted someone else to. You begin listening when your body whispers instead of waiting for it to scream. You rest without guilt. You say no without apology. You allow yourself to feel joy without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because you're no longer living in reaction to the past, you're living in response to the moment. And that response is no longer fear. It's trust. Trust in your own resilience. Trust in the wisdom of your scars. Trust that you don't need to hold it all together to be whole. Because the truth is, You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be real. And the real you, the one who's been hidden beneath pain, stories, and expectations, is finally rising. Not to prove anything, not to please anyone, but simply to be free. And freedom, real freedom, isn't loud. It's steady. It's waking up without the weight of pretending. It's walking through your day without performing worthiness. It's being able to sit with your emotions, not to fix them, but to feel them without fear. That's the quiet revolution. Not changing who you are, but finally giving yourself permission to be who you are. Without shame, without explanation, without needing anyone else to approve it. Because once you stop waiting for someone to rescue you, to understand you, to give you permission, something remarkable happens. You become your own source, your own home, your own peace. That doesn't mean you won't hurt again. It means when you do, you'll know how to stay with yourself through it. And that is the kind of power no one can take from you. You've rewritten the story, not into a perfect fairy tale, but into something real, something human, something beautiful, a story where pain didn't get the final word. You did. And now, as the noise quiets and the truth settles in, you realize something even deeper. You were never searching for healing. You were searching for yourself beneath all the layers, beneath the roles, the wounds, the silence. Healing was never the destination. It was the path back to your own presence, to that part of you that never needed fixing, only witnessing. And in that presence, you remember, you are not your pain. You are not your past. You are the awareness that holds them both. You are the space where it all rises and passes. You are the one who made it through, even when it felt like you wouldn't. And that knowing, that quiet, unshakable knowing, is what sets you free. Not because everything is finally okay, but because you are. You're no longer waiting for life to be perfect to feel at peace. You've realized that peace was never on the other side of achievement or closure. It was always here, in this breath, in this moment, in your decision to return again and again to the truth of who you are. Whole, worthy, home. And maybe that's the most sacred part of the journey. Not the moment you arrive, but the moment you realize you never had to go anywhere. That every step you took through the heartbreak, the silence, the struggle, was not leading you away from yourself, but back. Back to the place where you no longer measure your value by how much you've healed or how little you hurt. Back to the place where your worth is not a project to complete, but a truth to remember. Because now you carry something different. Not the weight of your past, but the wisdom of having faced it. Not the need to be understood, but the peace of understanding yourself. Not the fear of being alone, but the strength of finally belonging to yourself. This is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new one. One where your past is no longer your prison, but your teacher. One where you no longer shrink for love, perform for belonging, or abandon yourself for acceptance. One where you live from the inside out, unshaken, unfinished, unafraid. So now the question becomes, what will you do with this freedom? This self you've uncovered, not created, but uncovered, beneath the noise, the pain, the expectations. Will you protect it? Will you honor it? Will you let it guide the way you move through the world from this point on? Because healing is not just personal, it's powerful. When you rise, you give others permission to rise. When you speak to yourself with compassion, you teach others how to speak to themselves. When you stop abandoning yourself, you shift something in the world around you. You become the light you were once searching for. You become the safe place you were once denied. And no, you don't have to save anyone. You don't have to be perfect or enlightened or healed in every corner of your soul. You just have to keep choosing truth. Keep choosing presence. Keep choosing yourself. Again and again, until it's no longer a choice, but a way of being. Because you've done the hardest part already, you stopped waiting to be rescued. You turned inward. You listened, and now you know everything you've been looking for was always within you. And that knowing That deep, embodied truth becomes your foundation. You no longer chase peace like a distant goal. You live it, moment by moment, breath by breath. You no longer fear the return of pain because you've learned how to hold it without losing yourself. You no longer rely on others to tell you who you are because you've met the part of you that never changes, never leaves, never needs permission to exist. This is what it means to be whole. Not to never break, but to stop pretending you were ever anything less than complete. To carry your scars as symbols of transformation, not shame. To walk forward without armor, not because you're invincible, but because you've become honest, soft, awake. This is the quiet power of the healed heart. It doesn't shout, it doesn't fight, it simply is, rooted, steady, free. And now as you take your next step, remember, the journey never really ends. But the struggle to find yourself, that part is over. You're already home. Then let's go deeper, because if healing has stalled, it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because you haven't yet touched the roots. Imagine a tree with dying leaves. You could trim the branches, water the surface, polish the bark, but if the roots are poisoned, nothing changes. The same is true for your inner life. You can meditate, journal, talk things through, but if you're still holding on to beliefs that quietly say, I'm not enough, I'll always be abandoned, or I don't deserve peace, the suffering returns. So ask yourself honestly, what are the roots of my pain? Whose voice do I still carry? What story do I still live inside that was never mine to begin with? Maybe it's the belief that love must be earned. Maybe it's the fear that rest is weakness. Maybe it's the quiet agreement you made long ago to shrink so others could stay. These are not flaws in your character, they're survival blueprints. They were formed in moments when you needed to feel safe, needed to feel seen, but now they are suffocating your growth. And the truth is, you can't heal what you still believe is necessary. So the real work is not about fixing yourself. It's about uprooting what no longer belongs and planting something truer, kinder, deeper in its place. So let's sit with it now, not to fix, but to finally see. Close your eyes, take a breath, and ask yourself, what am I still carrying that no longer belongs to me? Whose shame am I holding? Whose silence am I repeating? What belief have I accepted as truth simply because it was passed down through pain? This is how we begin to pull at the roots, not with violence, but with tenderness. We don't rip them out. We witness them. We question them. We hold them up to the light and ask, is this mine? Is this true? Is this helping me heal or keeping me stuck? Because many of the stories you live by aren't yours. They're inherited. They're absorbed. They were taught to you by wounded people, by a society that profits off your self-doubt, by moments where love was conditional and self-worth was earned. But now you get to choose. You get to decide which beliefs get to stay and which ones must go. You get to stop clinging to what was never meant to define you. And in doing so, you begin the real healing, not surface peace, but a deep cellular reorientation to who you truly are without the poison in your roots. This is liberation, not becoming someone new, but returning to the self that was buried beneath everything you were told you had to be. And once you've seen the roots, really seen them, you can no longer unsee them. That belief that you're unlovable, it trembles under the weight of your awareness. The voice that says you're too much or not enough, it starts to lose its power when you stop feeding it. Because now you're not reacting blindly. You're observing. You're interrupting the loop. And here's the truth most people never hear. Your suffering isn't caused by the pain itself. It's caused by the meaning you gave it. The moment you were rejected, you didn't just feel hurt. You decided you weren't worthy. The moment you were abandoned, you didn't just feel alone. You decided you were forgettable. But what if none of that was true? What if those moments weren't reflections of your worth, but reflections of someone else's limits? This is how healing begins at the root, not by rewriting the past, but by rewriting your interpretation of it, by going back to the moment it hurt the most and telling a new story, one that's rooted in truth, one that doesn't make you the problem, but the survivor, the witness, the one who lived through it and kept their heart open. Because once you change the root, everything that grows from it changes too. Your thoughts, your choices, your self-talk, your capacity for peace. Healing doesn't happen because the world becomes kinder. It happens because you do, because you stop repeating pain and start choosing truth. Again and again, until one day, what once triggered you becomes what reminds you of how far you've come and how free you've become. And as you keep choosing truth, you'll begin to notice something subtle but profound. The things that once unraveled you no longer do. The voice that used to send you spiraling now passes through like a breeze. The memories that once haunted you begin to soften, not because they've disappeared, but because you've changed your relationship to them. This is the power of working at the root. You don't just feel better for a day, you begin to live differently. You stop reacting from old wounds and start responding from inner wisdom. You stop chasing validation because you've remembered your inherent worth. And slowly, the things that used to define you, your pain, your patterns, your past, become part of your story, not the whole of it. Think of a garden. Once you clear the weeds, once you nourish the soil, the space that felt overgrown and hopeless becomes fertile again. This is your mind. This is your heart. This is your life when the root of suffering is released. Not perfect, not painless, but peaceful in a way you didn't know was possible. And that peace, it's not something you earn. It's something you return to. Every time you choose to let go of what you were taught and lean into what you now know. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are the gardener now, and your healing is yours to grow. And now that you're the gardener, the question shifts from what hurt me to what do I want to grow? Because once the roots of suffering have been exposed and cleared, you're left with something sacred, space. Space to choose differently, to believe differently, to live from a place that isn't survival but intention. So ask yourself gently, what do I want to plant here? Maybe it's trust. Maybe it's self-respect. Maybe it's the courage to speak your truth without shrinking. Maybe it's the quiet knowing that you are worthy, not because of what you've done, but because you exist. And the beautiful thing about this stage of healing is that it no longer comes from force. It comes from alignment. You're not trying to become someone else. You're simply making room for who you've always been. That version of you who doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't need to beg for love, doesn't need to wear a mask to be safe. The roots have been tended. The soil has been turned. Now it's time to nurture something new, to water it daily with presence, with kindness, with boundaries, to protect it from the old voices when they return, not with fear, but with firm love. Not anymore. That's not my truth. Because now your life is no longer a reaction. It's a creation, built from the inside out. And it all began the moment you had the courage to look at the roots and choose not to let them define you any longer. And that choice to no longer let your roots of pain dictate the shape of your future is the quiet revolution. The moment everything changes, even if nothing outside of you has. Because for the first time, you're not running, not hiding, not pretending. You're standing in your truth, raw and rooted, and saying, I will build a life that reflects who I truly am, not who I had to be to survive. This is where healing deepens into embodiment. It's no longer just something you think about, talk about, or hope for. It becomes how you live. You move through the world with more awareness, more compassion, more clarity. Not because life is suddenly easy, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself when it's hard. And from this place, you start attracting differently. You're no longer drawn to what wounds you. You're drawn to what aligns with your peace. You no longer chase people who mirror your old wounds. You connect with those who reflect your new wholeness. Your boundaries strengthen. not as walls, but as sacred gates. Your voice softens, not out of fear, but because there's no longer a war inside you to defend. This is the gift of tending to your roots. You stop living a life based on pain and start creating one based on peace. You become the safe place you always searched for. The rooted tree in a world of wind. The clear river after the storm. You finally, as you were meant to be, not poisoned by the past, but nourished by truth. Free, grounded, alive. Here's the part we don't talk about. The part we hide behind curated profiles, achievements, and filtered smiles. We are terrified of being unseen. Not just unnoticed, but truly unseen. Because deep down, we've tied our self-worth to the reactions of others. A glance, a like, a compliment, a response. And when it doesn't come, we shrink, we doubt, we unravel. We tell ourselves we're not enough. Not because it's true, but because someone else didn't say otherwise. That is the lie of external validation, that your worth lives in someone else's perception, that you're only lovable when someone says so, that you only exist fully when someone else affirms it. And so you perform, you adapt, you shrink or shine depending on the room you're in, you post, then wait, you speak, then flinch, you love, then wonder if it's too much. But here's the truth that unravels that life. Your peace can be given by others, it can be taken by them too. If your sense of self depends on applause, then silence becomes your enemy. And that is no way to live. Because validation isn't love, it's addiction. It soothes the surface while starving the soul. It gives you a hit of acceptance, followed by the crash of self-doubt. It keeps you chasing people who were never meant to hold your truth because you've forgotten how to hold it yourself. But what if you stopped chasing? What if you stopped waiting for permission to be worthy? What if you let go of the need to be understood and chose instead to understand yourself? Imagine the freedom of no longer needing to explain who you are. Imagine the peace of walking into a room and not scanning for approval. Imagine waking up one day and realizing you already belong to yourself. That kind of wholeness cannot be given. It must be remembered. And yes, it will feel unfamiliar at first, because the silence you used to fear will greet you. The emptiness you used to run from will arrive, but it's not emptiness, it's space. Space where your voice can finally echo back to you. Space where you can hear the sound of your own truth without interference. Space to choose who you want to be when no one is watching. And in that space, something sacred happens. You stop performing and you start becoming. Not the version of you that earns love, but the one that is love. Not the version of you that bends for approval, but the one that stands in alignment. Not the version of you that's constantly proving, but the one that knows you are enough. You have always been enough. And no applause, no praise, no rejection can ever add or take that away. Because once you know your own worth, the world's silence stops feeling like rejection and starts feeling like peace. So now let's bring it from the mind into the body. Because healing isn't just an idea, it's a practice. You've heard the words, you've felt the truth rising in you, but your nervous system, your heart, your breath, they're still holding on. So close your eyes. Take a slow, conscious breath. Feel the inhale move through your chest down into your belly. Feel the exhale soften your shoulders. Now imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a river. It's wide, endless, flowing gently but steadily. In your hands, you hold stones. Each one is a memory, a wound, a regret. Maybe it's the person who left you. Maybe it's the shame you've carried for years. Maybe it's the voice in your head that still says you're not good enough. And one by one, you look at them, not with judgment, not with shame, but with compassion. You don't try to throw them away. You simply release. One stone, one breath. You drop it into the water. You watch it fall. And the river takes it. No ceremony, no resistance. Just release. Another stone, another story, another heavy thing you were never meant to carry this long. And as the water moves, you begin to feel something rise. Not a rush, but a stillness. Not euphoria, but clarity. The realization that letting go isn't about erasing the past, it's about refusing to be owned by it. You don't need to drown in your story to honor it. You can let it flow. Let it move through you like the river, carrying away what no longer serves you while carving space for something new. And maybe for the first time you feel it, the space that opens when you stop gripping, the lightness that arrives when you stop resisting, the peace that doesn't come from solving everything, but from releasing enough to finally breathe again, enough to make room for the version of you that's not weighed down by memory, by expectation, by grief. That version is already here, beneath the weight, and the river has always been waiting, not to change you, but to carry away what you were never meant to hold forever. All you have to do is let go. We live in a world that fears solitude, a world that tells you if you're alone, something must be wrong, that if you're not constantly surrounded by people, noise, movement, you're failing at life. So we fill the silence with screens, with relationships that don't nourish us, with noise we mistake for connection. But beneath all of that, beneath the scrolling, the endless messaging, the performative closeness, is a deep, unspoken truth. Most people are terrified to be alone, not because they dislike solitude, but because in solitude they finally have to face themselves, and that's the part they've been running from. But what if solitude isn't emptiness? What if it's not punishment? What if it's a sacred return? A homecoming to the one person you've spent your entire life trying to earn love from, yourself. Because when you sit in silence long enough, the noise inside begins to settle. The voices of doubt quiet down. The ache of not being seen softens. And in that stillness, something extraordinary begins to surface. Not loneliness, but presence. Not lack, but fullness. You start to hear your own voice. Not the one that performs or pleases, but the one that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. You begin to realize that your value was never in how many people needed you, how many messages you received, how well you fit into the crowd. It was always in your being, your breath, your awareness. And in solitude, you finally give yourself space to feel that, to discover joy that isn't dependent on anyone else, to laugh without an audience, to cry without apology, to exist, not for someone, but with yourself. And when you do, something else shifts. You stop clinging to relationships out of fear. You stop tolerating things that drain you just to avoid being alone, because you're not afraid of the quiet anymore. You've made peace with it. And from that peace, you build connections that are real, not based on need, but on truth. You're no longer entering rooms trying to prove your worth. You're bringing your worth into every room you enter. That is the gift of solitude, not isolation, not withdrawal, but sovereignty. The reminder that you are whole, that you are enough, that you are never truly alone because you've finally come home to the one person who will never leave you, yourself. You've been taught that peace is something you earn, that it comes at the end of hard work, of achieving enough, fixing enough, healing enough. But that's the lie, because peace was never about control. It was never about getting everything right or making sure life cooperates with your plan. True peace doesn't come from mastery over life. It comes from surrendering to it, from letting go of the exhausting illusion that you must control every outcome, every person, every emotion in order to feel safe. Look at nature. The river flows around the rocks, the wind moves through the trees, the sky holds both sun and storm without resistance. Nothing in nature clings, nothing forces itself to be different, and yet everything finds its way. What if you lived like that? What if peace wasn't a destination, but a relationship with the present moment, exactly as it is? That's what surrender is. It's not giving up. It's giving into reality. It's saying, I may not like this, I may not understand this, but I trust I don't have to fight it to be okay. That trust changes everything. It shifts your nervous system from defense to ease. It softens your breath. It loosens your grip. You stop reacting to life like it's your enemy and begin meeting it like a dance partner. When things fall apart, you don't shatter, you adjust. When people disappoint you, you don't collapse. You set boundaries from clarity, not from pain. And when fear rises, you don't numb or flee. You stay, you breathe, you remember, this too is part of the path. This too is worthy of love. Peace lives here, not in a future without conflict, but in your capacity to be still in the middle of it, in your choice to stop resisting the wave and instead float. The more you surrender, the less life feels like a fight, and the more it feels like a rhythm, one that doesn't need to be controlled, only heard, only trusted, only allowed. Let's tell the truth about pain. It changes you, whether you want it to or not, whether you try to avoid it or face it. Pain carves itself into the body, into the voice, into the way you breathe when the room gets quiet. But here's what most people don't realize. Pain doesn't come to punish you. It comes to reveal you beneath the layers of who you were told to be, beneath the defenses you built to survive, beneath the stories you inherited about what it means to be strong. Pain isn't the end of you. It's the door to your depth, and how you meet it, that's where your power lives. You can resist it, numb it, hate it, or you can sit with it, listen to it, ask it what it came to teach, because pain is a messenger. It's a signal that something is ready to change. And if you meet it with presence instead of panic, it becomes a forge. Just like metal is strengthened by fire, you are shaped by what you endure. Not hardened, not closed, but refined, clearer, softer in the heart, stronger in the spirit. The most compassionate people you'll ever meet are not the ones who had it easy. They are the ones who suffered and stayed open, who were betrayed and chose not to become bitter, who fell apart and learned how to rebuild with gentleness. That's the alchemy of suffering, turning wounds into wisdom, turning loss into clarity, turning pain into a deeper capacity for love. You don't have to be grateful for the pain, but you can be grateful for who you became because of it. And one day you'll look back at what nearly broke you and realize it built something in you the world could never take away. A quiet resilience, a steady light, a heart that's been cracked open, not to be ruined, but to let more of you in and more of you out. That is how pain becomes power. Not by avoiding it, but by allowing it to change you in the direction of truth. There's a war happening inside so many people, not between right and wrong, but between who they were and who they wish they could be, between the voice that punishes and the part of them that's still trying to heal. We're taught to forgive others, to give them grace, to understand their wounds. But when it comes to ourselves, we are ruthless. We carry our mistakes, lens carved into stone. We replay the same memory again and again, telling ourselves we should have known better, done better, been better. But you were doing the best you could with the awareness, the tools, the strength you had at the time. That doesn't excuse what hurt, but it explains why it happened. And that's where compassion begins, not with justification, but with truth. The truth is, healing won't happen until you stop being at war with yourself, until you stop treating your past self like an enemy to conquer instead of a child to comfort. Think of who you were when you made that mistake, when you broke that promise, when you collapsed under the weight of your own fear. Can you see how scared you were? How lost? How much you needed love and didn't know how to ask for it? That version of you isn't here to be shamed. They're here to be forgiven. Not because they were perfect, but because you're done suffering for what they didn't know. Self-forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. It means you choose to stop reliving the pain as punishment. It means you offer yourself the same mercy you've given to others 100 times. And then there's the forgiveness you hold back from others, not because they deserve it, but because you think your pain protects you. But it doesn't. It only keeps the wound open. Forgiveness is not about them. It's about your freedom. It's the act of saying, I will not let what you did define how I love, how I trust, how I live. You don't need to let them back in. You don't need to pretend it didn't matter. You just need to put it down because you've carried it long enough. And you deserve to be free, not when they say sorry, not when justice is served, but now. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's power. It's choosing peace over pain. Self-compassion isn't indulgence. It's survival. And the day you stop fighting yourself is the day you begin to truly heal. Letting go is not a one-time event. It's not a single clean break. It's an art, a daily practice, a tender ritual of release that asks you to choose peace over certainty, freedom over familiarity, and truth over attachment. We think letting go means losing, but the truth is, clinging is what drains us. It's what keeps our hearts crowded with ghosts and our hands too full to receive anything new. And yet we resist. We hold on out of fear. Fear that if we release the memory, the person, the dream, will lose part of ourselves. But what if letting go is not about erasing what was, but about honoring it enough to no longer need to control it? Letting go doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means it mattered deeply, but it's no longer meant to shape your future. It means you can love someone and still walk away. It means you can grieve something and still grow beyond it. It means you no longer need to rewrite the past in order to be at peace with it. And here's the paradox. The more lovingly you let go, the less it hurts, because resistance creates suffering. Love creates space. So instead of forcing yourself to move on, try softening. Say goodbye, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Release not to forget, but to be free. Whisper to the past, thank you for what you gave me. I release you now so I can live fully here. The art of letting go is not in tearing away what hurts, it's in loosening your grip with compassion. Trusting that what's meant for you will stay, and what leaves was never yours to keep. And if it's still hard to let go, remind yourself, every time you do, you make space for something more aligned, more alive, more true. You don't lose yourself when you release. You return to yourself over and over again. Wholeness was never something you had to earn. It was never something waiting at the end of a perfect life, a perfect relationship, or a perfect version of you. Wholeness was always there, quiet, patient, waiting beneath the noise, beneath the shame, beneath the layers of who you thought you had to be. You don't become whole by fixing yourself. You become whole by remembering that you were never broken, by seeing that everything you once called damage was actually depth. Every scar, a map. Every tear, a signal that you felt that you cared, that you were still alive when life tried to shut you down. You are not the pieces. You are the space that holds them. You are the thread that weaves all of it together. The past that shaped you, the pain that opened you, the truth that survived inside you. Coming home to yourself is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's a quiet moment, maybe in the dark, maybe in the stillness, when you finally stop running. When you look in the mirror and don't see a project to fix, but a person to love. When you realize that healing was never about returning to who you were before the pain, but becoming someone even more honest, even more rooted, even more free because of it. You are not here to perform wholeness. You are here to live it, to breathe it, to walk through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to be chosen because you already chose yourself. That is the return. That is the peace. And that is the truth. You were never lost. You were just waiting for yourself to come home. So here we are at the end of a journey that was never really about healing, but about remembering, about peeling away everything you were never meant to carry and returning to the truth that was always yours. You are whole. You are worthy. You are enough. Not someday, not if, but now. And the world may not change when you do, but your world will. The way you breathe, the way you speak to yourself, the way you show up, not out of fear or performance, but from love. And if you take nothing else from this, take this. Your peace is not in someone else's hands. Your power is not in the past. Your future does not have to be a repetition of your pain. You are the turning point. You are the quiet revolution. And every time you choose presence over panic, compassion over shame, truth over illusion, you become the medicine someone else is silently waiting for. So don't stop here. Keep walking, keep breathing. Keep choosing yourself in the moments it feels impossible. That is what healing looks like, not perfection, but persistence. And if this message spoke to something in you, if even one line helped you remember your worth, I ask only this: share it with a friend, with a stranger, with the version of you who needed it the most. Like, comment, subscribe, not just for algorithms, but for the community we're building. A space where healing isn't just an idea, but a way of being. Thank you for walking this path with me. This is not the end, this is the return. And from here, your real life begins.